Good day, everybody, and welcome to the Manufacturing Indaba, this particular session where we're going to look at localization. So localization, there are kind of two major viewpoints on it. One comes from the Department of Trade and Industry, which is all in favor. There is another one very well articulated by Anne Bernstein from the CDE, Center for Development and Enterprise, which is really against it. And we're going to listen to what our panelists have to say. All of them have views on localization and hopefully will be enlightening us all. So I think I'd like to start with Cas Kavudia, very well-known South African. He is currently Chief Executive of Business Unity South Africa, former MD of the Banking Association, has a sort of glorious past, I think, in South African politics and business generally. So, Cas, I don't think I have to introduce you beyond that. You are a member of CDE's board, so I'm not quite sure if you agree with everything that Anne Bernstein has to say about localization, but I'd like you to put forward the views on, is localization a good or is it a bad thing for South Africa?
Okay, so I don't think it's a binary issue, to be quite honest, whether it's good or bad. I think that as Business Unity South Africa, we've taken the view that we need to explore localization and try to initiate projects that promote local manufacturing. However, where we differ with government is that government seems to take the view of a one-size-fits-all approach, where the minister is quite clear that over the next 5 years, we must have 20% import substitution, and that's a target we should aim for. We've taken the view that we need to look at different products, a range of products, identify what the local manufacturing experience on those products have been, identify if we can actually bring some of those up to greater scale, and also then develop manufacturing capacity around those that also enables us to export some of those products. We, together with Business Leadership South Africa, had some work done by Intellidex, and the Intellidex report came out with a recommendation or finding that said, sure, localization is something that we should be exploring. It should not be a one-size-fits-all. We should look at different products. We should look at the industrial capacity around those products. We should look at the skills capacity around those products. We should look at past experiences and all of that, and the market, and whether we can manufacture those products competitively in this country. Look at all of that in devising a localization strategy. So that's where we are. What we've done is we pulled together a localization working group in Busa. We've identified approximately 30 chief executives from a range of product areas to act as champions, so who will make their procurement people available to us. We've just appointed a project manager for this. And we'll work with their procurement people to identify a list of short-term products that are low-hanging fruit to actually jack up our local manufacturing capacity on, because they meet all of these criteria, and then look at medium and long-term products down the line. So that's where we are on localization. And so it's not a binary issue. It's not a yes or no issue. It's a question of, yes, there are possibilities and potential, and it depends on how we do it.
Thanks very much, Casper. So, I mean, the government has said there are 27 products at the moment, and they want to go up to 42. Do you have input into deciding what those 42 are?
We will be in ongoing discussion with the Minister of Trade and Industry and his people. Our inputs will be informed by what the procurement people of the companies that the CEOs head up tell us. So if we're going through that list of products at the moment, the initial list of products, if our work points to it leads to a conclusion that says, hold on a second, this list is too long. We need to concentrate on 10 out of the 30 products that are there at the moment. That's what we will input to government. If the work we do tells us that we need to increase that, we'll input that to government. But we believe that the number of products, how we do it, when we do it, needs to be informed by clear criteria that we need to meet. We need to have the industrial capacity to do that. We need to have the skills. We need to be able to manufacture this competitively in the country. There needs to be a market in the country for this, and it needs to have some sort of export capability. And that's going to inform the sort of products that we come up with. And then we'll have a discussion with DTI. At the end of the day, it's the people, businesses manufacturing these products that are going to have to do it. And we have to take guidance from those businesses.
So would I be right in sort of summarizing to say that USA does support the idea of localization, but it comes with a lot of provisos and a lot of looking at what the criteria are. And we're still in the process of getting there.
Absolutely. And this has got to make business sense. It's not, you can't do this through diktat in any way. It's got to be done organically, through doing the necessary work, putting together the necessary data, and then identifying some of the low-hanging fruit.
Thanks very much, Cass. I mean, we'll get back to it because there are a lot of people who are saying that it's not such a good idea because it results in fewer exports. But let's get that after we've spoken to everybody on our panel. So then I would like to go to Jonathan Shapiro. Now, I do know another Jonathan Shapiro who does cartoons, but I take it you're not the same Jonathan.
Hi, Peter. No, that wouldn't be the first time someone's mentioned that to me, but we're different people.
Right. So that Jonathan Shapiro and I used to go to Davos together, where we had a great many very late night sessions after midnight, looking at cartoons and enjoying them and arguing about whether they should be allowed or shouldn't. But this Jonathan Shapiro is a social impact entrepreneur, business leader and mentor, passionate about social development and problem solving, and the chief executive of a third generation family business, Lesco Manufacturing. So the company produces electrical products, the only remaining South African plugs manufacturer, and Jonathan joined Lesco in 2009. And his board member and CEO of the South Africa-Israel Chamber of Commerce. Right, let's hear your take on localization, Jonathan.
So, Peter, we're in the trenches, fighting this battle. I think localization is exceptionally important in South Africa, but like Cass mentioned, it has to be done correctly at a competitive angle. I don't think we can expect South African consumers to spend more than what they would buy from someone overseas. So the way that we see it is there are a few things in the system that need to change to enforce and to encourage people in positions of power to enforce localization. And a very simple example is any person who is a buyer, whether they're a retailer or they're in a corporate environment, that the way that they are measured on performance in terms of their KPIs, we're of the strong belief that if job creation was put down as a KPI, then the localization drive would be filtering down all the way through to that level, not just at a CEO level who when they sit around a round table with government and make the commitments. So in our experience, it's enforcing localization throughout the company, throughout the value chain. And in doing that, when it comes to manufacturing companies engaging with prospective customers, when there's a job creation component to it, I think that will change the conversation. We're we think the only manufacturer left in South Africa making these products, and we've been doing it for 21 years, and we know it's possible. So in our experience, filter down the localization drive all the way to the buyer or to someone in a position of buying, and then really work closely with the manufacturing company, get to see what they do, understand what needs to be done to become more competitive if that is the case. But I think there's an obligation from corporate SA to enforce this localization. whether it's with us or it's with someone else, and it doesn't matter the industry, it is going to be the biggest driver of job creation in South Africa. And in closing, Peter, in our business, we focus on employing people living with disabilities. So we've designed our business to do that. And I think if there's a social element to a business, it should be even more emphasized when having these conversations.
Thanks, Jonathan. So generally, these sessions are not to kind of advertise your own business, but I would be very interested in knowing exactly what it is that you produce besides plugs. So this is a chance for you to plug your plugs, as it were.
So a double adapter to charge your cell phone, a wall plug, a switch, a USB product, a multi-plug. So everything electrical, whether it's consumer or commercial. So whether it goes into a building to turn your light switch, your lights off with a light switch, to plug in your cell phone charger into the wall or through an adapter, we manufacture all of that here in South Africa, around 250 different products.
So how would you react to the criticism that says, if you restrict it to South African manufacturers, it's a disincentive for them to do better because they've got a closed market, so they don't have to produce better plugs, maybe different color plugs, like I noticed when I went elsewhere, they had all these a range of different color plugs. And in fact, it hampers exports by ensuring that everything stays within South Africa. You can't create exports by doing that. So localization is a disincentive to export. And by stopping those imports, you're actually not doing the economy any good at all.
So I think it does the exact opposite. South Africa is a relatively small market. So the reason why China is so competitive is because they supply the whole world. So as well as their domestic market. So localization, I think, will enable manufacturing companies to get to scale, and getting to that point at being able to manufacture at scale, you're automatically more competitive, and it already puts you in a better position to quote offshore. So for me, it does the complete opposite. Use the local market to grow your business, to get to a point where you can do the things you need to do to get the costs down, and then you'll be in a better position to make those contacts overseas. We've gone through this exact process. So we've lived it, we've experienced it, and we've learned from it. So I would completely disagree with that statement.
Okay, so you would say when for instance, Center for Development and Enterprise suggests that it reduces choices, reduces competition, raises costs, and is really anti-export because you stop innovation, you would say they're wrong from your personal experience?
From our industry, from where we're sitting, we would disagree with that. Like Cass said, it's not binary. But having lived and being in this industry now for 12 years and the business for 21 years, we would disagree with that statement. I think it would promote other local manufacturers to start doing what we do. That would increase competition, and the right kind of competition. Currently, in most markets, they are flooded by imports from around the world. A lot of them don't comply with the right specifications. So if you create an environment where there's going to be more local competition that's highly regulated, everyone wins, especially in an industry like electrical, where safety is a major component. So that's what we would say on that.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's always good to hear from the man at the coalface, actually, and who has the experience. So thank you very much indeed for that.
Thanks, Peter.
And then we come to our next panelist, our last panelist, but by no means the least, Petra Rea, a social entrepreneur who's commercialized a couple of African ventures. Her tech startup, Y Toys, provides educational content one can 3D print at school, straight off its proprietary content management platform. I was just being interviewed on radio about the manufacturing in Indaba, and I said, you'll be pleased to know that I mentioned your company, Y Toys, and thought back to my school days back in Bloemfontein. I mean, being able to 3D print a toy at school is like so far into science fiction. It's just amazing. So I'm dying to hear about it. I see that you're a winner of the Inspiring 50 and an executive board member of the Institute of Inventors and Innovators, and co-ambassador of the Women in 3D Printing Johannesburg. I'm as excited to hear you as I would be a new series of Star Wars. Petra.
Peter, thank you so much. That's exactly what I was hoping you're going to say. So it's going to make my life so much easier. But thank you so much. It's awesome to be here. Thank you. Shall I take my take on localization straight from there?
Yes, please. I'm sorry, I should have said that.
Fantastic. Fantastic. No, so when I actually was also very much in the trenches for 10, 15 years, developing actually small businesses in local communities around the mines and really in remote areas of South Africa. So being there and understanding what is possible and what is not possible, and creating a circular economy, sustainable economy, and how localization is important to have sustainable communities. That's really kind of what inspired me to do the next thing. And that's really why I got into 3D printing, because I believe that 3D printing is actually a darling, or should become a darling technology of Africa, not just of South Africa. And it's exactly precisely for the reason. And we mentioned education because, for us, it started with, let's start with the small children, because, the sooner we can equip them with the right skills, the better we will be in, 10, 15 years from now, right? And we've proven that. We've proven that a 9-year-old can actually develop beautiful models as quickly as a 20-year-old. They actually are, we're almost limiting them, right? As they're growing up, we're actually limiting them what we think is possible and what's not possible. So the key is there, obviously, getting kids into those kind of technologies as from early on. But where we're sitting now at the moment is that we have taken 3D printing into the communities, and that's always was kind of the dream, to say, let's be right there where it's needed. We're a local company that is made out of women from the community, can 3D print for a mine, can 3D print products for a local farmer, for a panel beater. So we've taken the approach starting in the healthcare, because obviously with COVID, people were very much in need of medical assistive devices, and also we augmented that to even wheelchair accessories and etc. And we've actually brought 3D printing into Eastern Cape, into Northern Cape, and really those kind of more remote locations where things like access to the right devices at the right time is important, as much as the cost. And that's why we kind of promoting not just localization, but hyper-localization. How can we make things for people in the communities where it's needed? So, somebody like, us sitting here, we probably go to a private clinic and get a splint, right? For our finger and get it assisted. But somebody who is sitting in a more remote area, it's not as quickly and it's not as simple as that. But you can 3D print a simple splint for your fingers. In a matter of half an hour, 1 hour, it can be printed even faster, obviously on much bigger and much more industrial 3D printers. I'm talking about the entry level even printers. Things that, and what we've proven is not just that it's the right product for people at the right price and what they need, but it's also goes further. Actually, we work with orthopedic specialists in, for example, Eastern Cape, who develop things for the community and developing their own products now and they're 3D printing them, like club feet accessories for children with club feet that they can 3D print. Things like hand supports, that you can 3D print. And there are so many other items that we identifying pulley systems. I just brought a few things because I just thought to just show people how real that is, and what you can achieve with a technology that is hugely underestimated in South Africa. I think that we're looking at the world bringing us the goods and things, but we're actually not realizing how much we can be doing here locally. And just the other day, we printed a part for a car brand, I don't want to name one, that normally costs that panel beater 5,000 Rand because they have to buy the whole component, as you know. But they actually, so the whole component was just over 5,000 Rand. We 3D printed that small component for an entry-level 3D printer machine in that community for 5 Rand, Peter. And that's exactly what we need to do.
That's amazing.
No, and that's exactly why it's so amazing and why I get excited, and where the targets are, like for the automotive industry, that we need to start producing from 39%, we need to produce 60%, you know, of parts over the next 15 years. We can do that, and we can do more, and we can really make it our own specialization, and we can export it to the rest of the world. So yeah, so I can talk for a long time. I move on now.
Well, I could listen for a long time, because I mean, it's very exciting. I'd like to know, can you 3D print a 3D printer?
You can 3D print a 3D printer, and that's exactly one of the, actually a lot of OEMs are doing that. We actually 3D printed components in South Africa already, and you have 3D. They call it the 3D printing farms, and I think that's what we can achieve so easily. And it shouldn't just stay in the labs, Peter. And I think that's also one of the needs where we need the industry to actually be requesting more and not leave. For example, CSIR developed amazing technologies around 3D printing when it comes to materials and etc., but it's still in their labs because there is not enough demand in the market, because people are not educated about it. People do not know how to bring that technology into their workspace. And therefore, we need more incentives and more education when it comes to the government sector and that kind of public-private partnership around that. What kind of technologies can we bring into our work environment to really achieve those targets? You know, to push us further, to become the exporters.
So Petra, how many 3D printers do we have in the country?
We have a lot of hobbyists as well, mind you. So there's thousands of hobbyists that have obviously like a home 3D printer. We have car industry that has more specialized metal grade 3D printers. Certain universities like the Stellenbosch University and the CUT, they have, actually the CUT had one of the first titanium 3D printers that they do a lot of healthcare implants that are happening in the space. So we have pockets of excellence, and we have few OEMs already, and one actually a young OEM called Nova Tech that is actually manufacturing.
Sorry, what's an OEM?
Original equipment manufacturer. So Jonathan would be there. You have an OEM right there sitting with us. Thank you so much for clarifying. So we have a manufacturer of 3D printer, which is a very specialized 3D printer in South Africa, and they're exporting mainly into America, their products. So we have amazing actually pockets of excellence. Is that at the moment they're a little bit not disenfranchised, but there is just not enough of them. Let's put it this way.
Okay, so your kind of localization is very local. When you talk about the Northern Cape and places like that and schools, are you looking for some kind of protectionist policy from government where they stop imports, or are you quite happy where you are? I mean, this kind of localization policy, this panel seems to me to be looking at government policy and business policy towards localization. But you seem to be talking about a slightly different kind of localization.
100%. And I think, but mind you, that there is a lot of need that needs to come from the government side around localization when it comes to specific products. Let's say there is one of the products that was identified as cement and around construction. So we need, and a good example is 3D printing in construction. We need we can actually become the 3D printing in construction exporter to the world. But what we need government to actually step in and start promoting that kind of technology in those industries. very specifically and targeted. So it can't be just, let's make better cement. No, actually, how do we bring in exponential technologies to industries so that they can grow better? So that's where we need government to actually step in more and almost like put more emphasis on those kind of technologies to say, how are we, if we're achieving those localization, how much percentage of that? What is the digital, what technologies and exponential technologies are you going to be using in your business? For example, Jonathan, Busa, how much percent? And that's where the government needs to step in and actually put more, not parameters necessarily, but guidance and education. Even education is absolute key. I mean, a good example is 3D printing construction, because government needs to evangelize that 3D printed houses are better. In fact, there's less, 70% less carbon emissions, for example. They cost less than your classic, your conventional 3D, your conventional construction. But people are not aware of it. People want that brick and mortar RDP house. So we need government to also step in and educate on a grand scale when it comes to different components of localization, to actually say, this is what we're going to do as a government. We're actually going to change the old way of doing things.
Okay, so you're looking for kind of advertising and PR and for government to inform people and for education. Can I ask Cass, what do you feel about that?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, the one caveat, if you like, is that not just government, but even the private sector should be promoting locally manufactured products on the basis that those are competitively priced, they are of good quality, and we're not expecting consumers to actually make any compromises in using those products. And I think we can do that. So I don't think there's any problem. So let me just give you an example. I mean, during COVID is still with us, but during the height of COVID last year, we imported initially all of our PPPs because we needed them urgently. We then started looking at with DTI whether we can generate local capacity to actually manufacture PPEs. Today, we've got about just over 20 odd medium-sized manufacturing companies that are manufacturing a significant amount of PPE that we need. But the private healthcare sector and others are not using that effectively. And that's because there still seems to be a sort of perception that locally manufactured goods might not be up to standard, might not be competitively priced and so on. So provided those criteria are met, I think both the public sector and private sector should promote locally manufactured goods. And I don't have a problem with that at all.
Thank you. Jonathan?
Yeah, definitely from our view, we agree. I mean, we use 3D printing all the time to do mock-ups and to show our customers our new inventions. And it's our turnaround time with the 3D printer that often gets us the deal, showing what they've envisioned, putting it into a product that's a working product. So I think there's definitely merit to what everyone said. I guess also to touch on what Cass said about, you can't expect consumers to foot the bill of a localization program. We agree. I think in summary, government promoting and putting its stamp of approval on certain industries that have localized, or to showcase local companies doing what they need to do, and to pass those quality hurdles that there might be. I think if government could maybe take ownership of that process, it would solve exactly what everyone else has said on the panel. Is it's not just up to the private sector dealing with a certain a custom down the road trying to convince them to buy it, but if it's government endorsed, because we've got SABS or ISO compliant or whatever it is that we needed to get, and we're competitive, it would be great for government to have a bigger role in that.
Okay, thanks. Well, I think, Petra, I think you've got two supporters here in Cass and Jonathan. I'm now going to come to some of the more tricky questions, like does localization reduce efficiency? Does it move skills from actually producing goods into lobbying government to try to get your particular thing onto the list? Are they the costs to the government and the taxpayers? Don't those costs go all the way down the line when you suddenly put a protectionist arm around some kind of manufacturing, whether it's steel or anything else? Is the automotive sector seen as being successful? Meanwhile, cars cost more in South Africa than virtually anywhere else on the planet, from what I've seen. Let me just quickly have a look at what else I've written down. Does it reduce choices, competition, and does it push up the costs? So those are the kind of criticisms that I've got of localization. And I'd quite like to hear what you've got to say first, Cass.
Okay, so I think those are valid questions, and that's why we're saying that you don't just. So why are we working with government on localization at the moment? We're working with government because we, together with government, labor, and community groups, developed an economic recovery action plan last year, and part of that plan is localization. Okay, but why we say that this can't come through diktat. You can't say that, well, we're identifying 30 products and all those products need to be locally manufactured and all those products need to meet a target of 20% import substitution in 5 years' time. It just doesn't work that way. So we've got to look at the products. We've got to ensure that we actually identify products that we can. One, we've got some history of local manufacturing. Ask ourselves, why have those not gone up to scale? Two, we've got to ask ourselves, are we able to import those products in the country far more competitively than we can produce them here? If we are able to, then we shouldn't be producing them here, to be quite honest, because it's not good for economic growth, it's not good for consumers. Three, would we require undue protectionist measures from government? I mean, you know, we criticize when we talk about protectionism, but the global economy, so if you look at the protectionist tactics of the agricultural community in Europe, for instance, okay, to promote their own agricultural community. Now, we're not saying we need to do that, but if it makes sense for us to actually promote a particular set of products, which right now may not be competitive, but with a certain amount of help do become competitive, and we then allow them to run, we should consider that. We should look at the motor industry and others and see, what do we learn from that? Why, when motor industry has had significant subsidies, that vehicles are still more expensive here than in any part of the world. So we need to look at all of this. We need to look at our past experiences. And on the basis of that, say, if we're serious about local manufacturing, if we're serious about bringing some products up to scale, and if we're serious about doing that in a way that actually ensures that those are competitively produced in the country, they add to job creation, they add to economic growth, and they are not a burden on the consumers, then let's look at that and let's see what we can do around that. What we can't do for a whole range of reasons, because it's not competitive, we don't have the skill and so on, we must say we can't do that. So these aren't political discussions, these are hard business discussions. And it's got to make business sense, and that's our starting point.
Cass, could I ask whether the relationship between business and government is getting better? I mean, clearly once Cyril came into power, there was going to be a better relationship. But is that relationship getting warmer and warmer? And is the president listening to business, or the president and his council, more and more, or is there a cooling off?
So to me, definition isn't whether it's getting warmer or cooler. I don't need government to be warm to me or cool to me. I need an effective relationship and a robust relationship that actually begins to implement plans that we have on the table. I think we've got a long way to go in that. We talk often, I can't complain about access to government from the president down. But I don't think that we, even though meetings are structured in a way that we put some of the real tough issues on the table, lock ourselves up in a room, see what compromises and trade-offs need to be made, because they do, and move forward on that basis. So I think there's a way to go on that, but we keep on pushing at that. Yeah.
And localization is at the edge of that, isn't it? I mean, localization is one of the issues where government and business need to agree on the way forward, I would think.
Absolutely. And look, you know, as you say, I mean, Anne would have a different view on localization. So there may not be a uniform view on localization across business. And that's one of the critical reasons why government needs to understand that we've got to get onto the same page, and important items on that same page have got to be that we do this in a way that makes business sense. You can't expect, I'm not going to walk into a store and look at since we're talking about 3D printers, look at 3D printers, and one that we've imported from, I don't know, where is cheaper than the one that we've produced here in the country. I'm going to buy the one that's imported. Yeah, that's how consumers behave, right? I don't stand there and say, hold on, I need to be patriotic here. So it's got to make business sense. We've got to be competitive producers of the products. We've got to ensure that not only is there a market for the products here, but as Jonathan has said, our market is not that big. We should be able to export those products to the continent and elsewhere. And those criteria need to be met. Otherwise, the current sort of interest in localization in business will wither away.
Thank you. Jonathan, do you have some kind of protection for producing electrical goods in South Africa?
So there is a duty that's on a lot of the products that we manufacture, but there's also an export rebate, mainly out of the East, which kind of cancels that out. But you know, listening to what everyone's been saying and being in this industry, localization, I don't think has to come from the government. If it makes good business sense, it should happen anyway. And more so, you know, what I think the value chain needs to understand is that if it does make business sense in a commercial way, you're also creating more customers for you and your partners. You know, so the economics just make a lot of sense for localizing where it makes sense, and it doesn't necessarily have to be put into, you know, how cement was designated. I don't think it necessarily has to be like that. It has to be, you know, big corporate SA needs to look and say, well, how do we create more customers for ourselves if they really just want to look at it from a commercial point of view, and let's engage with local companies to see if we can make that happen. More specifically, in our particular industry, or in our particular business, is getting people off social grants. Those who have never been given the opportunity to be off social grants, I think when you plug in all of these added benefits, it's just good business to localize. And obviously, assuming that you're competitive and the quality is right.
Right, but when you're talking about localization, then you're not necessarily talking about governments designating a certain thing as being you can only have it if it's produced in South Africa. You are talking about be local in what you buy and what you do. Am I correct in that?
You can have both, but I don't think I don't think manufacturing companies should depend on being designated. The dialogue should be there to have these conversations, strategic conversations with your customers or prospective customers to see if it is possible to localize. That should be the general sense of what goes on.
Okay, then in terms of the manufacturing Daba's kind of theme for the week, it really is turning Africa into a single market, as it were. Are you exporting into Africa at all?
So currently we export to a few SADC countries, but a lot of them also have the South African specification. In electrical, it's a little bit different because most countries have their own plug. Africa, majority of Africa is made up of 2 different specifications, but it is something that we're looking at now, setting up plants in Africa using our business model or exporting from South Africa. So we're looking at it more seriously into the future.
You know, it's sort of in the 80s, I went to what was then the European Community, the EC. I mean, one of the first things they did was regulate that everybody had the same kind of plugs, right? Which made sense. At that stage, there were only, I think there were 14 countries wanting to become 16. They're now 27, minus Britain, 26. Do you think that Africa is going to one day have the same plug size everywhere?
I mean, it would make our lives a lot easier, but I don't think so. South Africa, about 4 years ago, has just changed the South African plug. So our plugs have changed, and they're in the process of changing in South Africa. So unless the rest of Africa wanted to change towards ours, I don't see it happening. But again, it changes their supply chain. Most of the product going into Africa comes from the East, and Malaysia has got the same specification as most of Africa. So I think it will completely change the economics of scale around the world. In terms of a South African company, it would be amazing for that to happen, but I don't think it will happen.
Thanks very much. Petra, do you think that we should be banning imports of other 3D printing machines and only use ones created or printed in South Africa?
Yeah, it's a good question. So a lot of and you know, it's the kind of free market, and how free market already created a lot of opportunities for people, you know, wanting to manufacture here locally, wanting to make 3D printers locally. You know, it's not just, there's a lot of efficiencies that the overseas manufacturers are obviously achieving, because they are much further in their development process, you know, in their R&D, and just in their economies of scale, on specific 3D printers when it comes to 3D printers maybe for home use and etc. But when it comes to specialized 3D printers, and that's where I always think that South Africa and Africa has a huge opportunity, is those specializations, that there is still a huge gap, and we can really, whether it's a specialized machine, 3D, the technology itself, and mind you that there's a whole range of technology when it comes to 3D printing, or whether it's materials, you know, we can develop, and there's already materials that have been developed specifically for African environment, that can biodegrade, for example, in African environment, in South Africa. So there's been a lot of that already achieved, and we can do more. We can again develop more specialized, for example, materials. We can have amazing designers and reverse and engineers who can reverse engineer an item, a product that can achieve longer lifespan for let's say a tractor or any other machine, you know, that's typically on an African continent goes further than anywhere else in the world. So I think where the opportunities lie more for us is where those specializations, and they are available. We just need to understand and essentially bridge the gap between the mouth and the spoon. You know, how do we get the right skills up there as quickly as possible? And that's why, for example, promote 3D printing heavily, is because you can upskill a machine operator within a couple of weeks. You can get a person to be a really good modeler and designer within 6 months to 12 months. I mean, we're sitting, you know, with the fact that let's teach kids coding, and it takes years, tens of years to become a really good coder, but you can really get people into very, very quickly into additive manufacturing and 3D printing, and develop our own industries, our own. Imagine that even the 3D printing in construction, we can become the leader, and we've seen it in other industries. If you look at, for example, a company called Aerobotics. They are a South African company, and they've been born out of need in agri-space to achieve precision agriculture. So making sure that the right crops have the right amount of fertilizer, right? And they use drone technology for that, and IoT and etc. They are scaling so hugely.
Sorry, what's IoT and etc.?
Sorry, Internet of Things, for example, in this case, thank you, but mainly in the helps of drones, and they're growing, they're booming in the United States. And this is South African company. This is our company. So what it means that we need to look at also how can we, through localization, not just make the old ways more efficient, but how can we grow with the help of technology? How can we develop new things, new ways that we can export to the rest of the world because we become at it better? And that's where we need the government to say, we stand behind those. We're going to stand, for example, behind 3D printing and construction. I'm just saying it because it was just said so many times. Or, you know, we are going to protect more around, for example, 3D printing in automotive industry, because we're going to identify those SKUs, those items that can be 3D printed here locally, until the point where we become better and we can actually export them overseas. Yes.
But you're not asking for them to put a tariff on 3Ds that coming from elsewhere, or are you?
Well, it depends on what machines, right? And that's the decision that needs to be taken, not on everything. That wouldn't make sense either. But on those specialized items that we can actually do here locally. I mean, tariffs to a certain degree, and even Cass said that, let's not pretend that Europe or America are free markets. No, they are very protectionist markets and very in their industries. And we should do the same. Why not to do that in as it was already said, very carefully, but also with decisive decisions. I mean, BE legislation, when it came to the first forefront, for example, 15 years ago, everybody was like, oh my goodness, how are we going to achieve this? We don't have the right skills. We don't have this and that. And guess what? We did it. And, in certain areas, maybe we still have obviously room to improve it, but those legislations that actually put specific targets and specific tariffs, specific limits, restrictions, whatever you want to call it, are absolutely essential for our growth in the long term.
Now I want to know whether you can 3D print half an ear for me, because I have half an ear cut off. Well, I'd like to say Mike Tyson bit it off when we had a fight, but I'm afraid it wasn't quite prosaic.
I thought that you were competing there with Mr. Lauda. Anyway, so a ear cartilage has actually one of the things that's been 3D printed. So cartilage, that's actually we already there when it comes to bioprinting, believe it or not. So you're very close to having your dream fulfilled. I'm going
to talk to my doctor.
When it comes to 3D printing a heart, we're still about 10-15 years away. Functioning heart, fully functioning grown heart, that can be we can have a heart transplant essentially with a 3D printed heart. We're probably about 15 years away from that. But to that point, we're moving. There's so many pockets, as you can already identify. We need to move into those areas quickly.
Well, that sounds wonderful, because the doctor wants to take half of my other ear and build it and do all sorts of weird things. And my glasses keep falling off because I've only got half an ear. Anyway.
I think the University of Pretoria is pioneering quite in big times bioprinting. So I'll do the introduction.
There's a guy called Louis Nell. I hope he's heard about it. I'm going to talk to him about it. Cass, can we go back to you and just give us an overview of how far you think we are when it comes to, the entire topic of what we're doing is localization. And I'd like us to kind of end to say, well, this is how far we've come, and this is what the journey looks like ahead. To some extent, you did it at the beginning, but if you don't mind summarizing again.
Okay, so we're not starting from a clean slate. Right? Localization has happened. Local manufacturing, we did promote local manufacturing for quite some time. I think for very many reasons, it sort of, we haven't done as well as we should have done. So we need to learn from those lessons. But where are we now? I think certainly there's agreement across the board that we need to look at jacking up our local manufacturing capacity. We need to look at that in a way that we create jobs, in a way that we are competitive, in a way that we are very, very robust and clear about the sorts of products we identify to do that in. and look for our competitive edges. We don't need to necessarily compete with everybody around the world. There's stuff that we can do, like Petra is talking about specialized 3D printers. If that's something that we could develop a competitive edge in, let's look at that. So where are we in this process? As I said, we're looking at a range of products. We've just appointed a project manager to concentrate on this full time. Project manager will be working with procurement people in 30, 40 companies across the board. And we'll put together a well thought out, well researched list of products with the proper motivation that we believe in the short term we can begin working on for localization and local manufacturing. And that's where we are at the moment.
Can I ask, because it seems to me the theme of the manufacturing Indaba is the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, with a really AFCFTA. I don't know how you pronounce that, whether you can, by just using the acronym or not. But that's going to be the largest free trade area in the world, with a combined GDP of 3.4 trillion. I mean, it's a wonderful idea. But it does seem to me that localization is almost goes against that very theme, which is free trade everywhere.
No, and that's why I said in the beginning, I look at this more as jacking up our local manufacturing capacity. And to jack up our local manufacturing capacity, we don't just want to produce goods for our local consumption. Of course, we want to for local consumption, but we also want to produce goods that we can export to the continent and elsewhere. So the thing about, and maybe it's an understanding of localization. If the understanding of localization is that we're producing goods only for local consumption, locally produced goods for local consumption only, then it can't be successful because we have a very limited market. And why should we do that? If we're successful in manufacturing products competitively, efficiently, of good quality for the local market, why shouldn't we export those products elsewhere? Just doesn't make sense. So I'm quite clear that we need to look at products that we can bring up to scale, cater for the local market, but also be able to export those products because we are being efficient in producing them. We are doing it competitively, and we'd be able to compete with other countries that are trying to export, let's say, into the continent.
Thank you very much, Cass. It's very informative. You have a great grasp of what's going on, and I certainly feel much more educated than I was before. Jonathan, do you want a few closing remarks?
These sort of events give the right kind of exposure to localization and the importance of it. And I think everything that's been said, especially that it isn't binary, you have to take it on a case-by-case basis. And the initiative that BUSA is doing, I think, is amazing, kind of helping government and assisting government in this program. And I think it's just about creating more exposure for local companies, engaging with strategic partners. And I really believe we're in the trenches. We know it's possible, and we look forward to what the outcome will be.
Thanks very much. All right, Petra, I've listened to you with half an ear. Now you can have a final say.
Thank you so much, Peter. I'm a huge supporter for exponential technology and digitization that needs to happen when it comes to localization. So without that, we cannot develop our industry as quickly in order to achieve targets or dreams even. So I just would like to see more of that, of whether it comes to, how we're going to achieve that, how we're going to close those gaps when it comes to digital and exponential technology around skills, around subsidies, and all of these things. That needs to just happen as quickly as possible. We need to close those gaps, as I mentioned, the gap between the mouth and the spoon.
Right. Thank you very much, all three of you, all three of the panelists. It's been, for me, it's certainly been a fascinating journey about localization. I hope we've all learned a little bit and have some idea of where we are and what we can look forward to. I think that's it. I mean,
Thank you.
sorry, a little odd noise you heard there was I have a bird clock
Okay.
on the hour. It goes tweet,
Okay.
tweet. So, thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Thank you, Peter. Thanks, colleagues. Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much.
Thank you
Bye.
very much.
Bye.
Thank you.